So, hey everyone, thank you so much for popping in today to hear my latest webcast. Today I have the incredible joy. Joy is not the word I'm after, and unfortunately I lost my word. I'm incredibly
It's
honored.
okay.
How's this? I'm incredibly honored to be joined today by Lisa Goodmurphy. Now, Lisa is a family travel blogger. She blogs at gonewiththefamily.com. And she and her family just took a vacation to Ireland over their spring break. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And how long were you
In March.
there?
We were only there for 8 nights. It was quick.
And that's actually a pretty typical, 8 to 10 nights is really a pretty typical vacation in Ireland. But you guys took in a pretty big chunk of the country, didn't you?
We did. We had a lot of things that we felt like we had to see, and it was hard trying to figure out what to do.
Hmm.
The When we started planning our trip, the whole reason for going during spring break as opposed to during our summer holiday was that my 12-year-old daughter wanted to be in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day. So we had to plan around St. Patrick's Day and where we were going to spend St. Patrick's Day, which was the initial challenge in
Hmm.
planning out what we were going to be able to see and do.
Hmm.
And then the way it fell in our spring break, we actually have more than 2 weeks holidays for spring break, but Easter came at the end of it this year. And our older daughter wasn't able to travel with us because she's in university and has a different holiday. So we had to get there and get back before Easter was starting and be there for St. Patrick's Day. So it was a challenge coming up with an itinerary that was going to work.
Right,
And
that is.
pardon me?
Oh, I said, yeah,
So
I imagine it was.
yes, it was. And we decided early on, well, talking about St. Patrick's Day, that we might have more fun spending St. Patrick's Day outside of Dublin in another
Hmm.
community where there'd be a parade and we'd see more of the authentic Irish celebration rather than the big party that takes place in Dublin. Because traveling with a 12-year-old, we weren't really interested in drinking and partying in
Hmm.
Dublin for St. Patrick's Day. So we did a little research and we decided on Killarney. So our flights came in and out of Dublin, but we had to get to Killarney for St. Patrick's Day, which was sort of right in the middle of the time period that we had. So we did a big circle.
Oh, wow. So do you want to just tell me kind of pinpoint the places that you did go in your 8 nights?
Sure. So we flew into Dublin on March 13th. So we flew overnight. So we were tired. We just picked up a
Yes.
car and we decided we didn't want to go very far that first day.
Mhm.
So we decided to head over to the Wicklow area. Um, both my husband and I have been to Ireland before. It was our daughter's first trip. This was my second trip to Ireland. I think it's my husband's third. And our family's ancestors came from Ireland. So one of the places that we decided we wanted to visit was County Wicklow, and because my husband had done some research and discovered that his family came from Wicklow, Wexford sort of area. So we had a look at hotels and decided that the Powers Court Hotel looked very nice, and that it would
It
be
is,
perfect
isn't
to
it?
spend the first couple of nights in Ireland. And from there, we could do a little touring around and see the area that his family came from. So we started at Powers Court in County Wicklow. We spent the first 2 nights there. And then our second priority was staying in a castle, because we knew that Emma would love to spend at least one night in an Irish castle. And we had a little trouble finding one that was going to work with our itinerary. We ended up deciding on Dromoland Castle. And the only night that was available around that time was the 15th. So we had to go from Wicklow to Dromoland Castle, and we could only stay one night there, and then we had to get to Killarney so that we would be there for St. Patrick's Day. So we spent the first 2 nights in Wicklow at Powers Court Hotel, the next night at Dromoland Castle, and then the next 2 nights at the Killarney Park Hotel in Killarney. And then then we drove back to Dublin and spent the final 3 nights of the weekend of St. Patrick's Day festival weekend in Dublin.
That's really a busy schedule for that few of days. Um,
It was.
and it's quite a bit of land to cover because straight basically, Dromoland is straight across from Dublin. It's right near the Shannon Airport, but still that's three and a half hours. And then you've got another 2 to 2.5 down to Killarney, and then Killarney's straight back to Dublin. It's a good 4 hours or
Yeah.
so. So you had to
Because
really.
Yeah, we
Go
didn't.
ahead.
We don't mind driving and moving a lot, and it's easier for us traveling with a 12-year-old. That's different than traveling with young children because she can take a lot more, so we can
Right.
push her and she can do it. So the longest day of driving was the day back to Dublin, but we stopped at Blarney Castle on the way, and we stopped at Cove that day on the way back to break up the driving a little bit. But it took us the entire day to get back from Killarney to Dublin.
Yeah, that is, but you put in some really nice stops in there, so, and it's really a great idea to break up those long drives. Why don't you tell me? Let's talk about the castle. Now, Dromoland is, like I said, 15 or 20 minutes away from the Shannon Airport, so very, very easy to get to if you're flying in and out of the West, and then it is a few hours from Dublin. But it has a lot of places that are really not too far away that you can visit. When you were at the castle, did you just do the castle estate activities, or did you happen to venture out from there?
We ventured out. We arrived there. We drove from Powers Court, and we arrived, I think, late morning. We got a fairly early start, and then our room wasn't ready yet, so we decided to go for a drive. So we decided that drive to go to the cliffs of Moher, and we had a gorgeous, gorgeous day. It was bright, sunny, blue skies, so it was the perfect day for driving.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, we would have liked to go by Burn as well, but we just ran out of time. We wanted to get back to the hotel and get ready for dinner and everything. So in retrospect, I would have liked to have stayed longer at the castle because we didn't have time to really explore the area, and we didn't have much time for castle activities either. Because we needed to get to Army the next day. So we were moving, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to stay. My daughter was in love with our room in the castle. It was just gorgeous. She would have liked to taken the jaunty cart around the castle, but we didn't think of it the day we arrived, and then found out that the driver wasn't there the next day, or we would have done that. So we weren't able to do the little tour, which was a little disappointing, but we were able to go for a walk around the property and feed the birds in the lake and all of that. So it was nice. So it wasn't a long stay, but it was a beautiful stay.
Well, and those castle stays, I mean, I know we did just one night at Ashford, and it's been a couple of years now, and that one night still is just ingrained in my memory because it is really an amazing, magical experience.
My husband and I stayed at Ashford Castle when we were there 20 years ago. So, a long time ago, but it's gorgeous.
And yeah, and it really is. So then you went on to Killarney, and you went to Killarney mainly with the idea of celebrating St. Patrick's Day. So now we all see the pictures from Dublin, and few people realize that St. Patrick's Day really wasn't celebrated with parades and a lot of revelry until like about 20 years ago in Ireland. It was a feast day for the patron saint. A lot of things were closed. You know, a lot of times couldn't buy alcohol, couldn't go to a pub. And so that's changed quite a bit. And we all have probably seen the pictures of Dublin and the big parades and the everything that's going on. So when you went into Killarney, what were you expecting for St. Patrick's Day? Did you have a good idea of what you were going to see, or was it all just kind of, flying by the seat of your pants?
We were mostly flying by the seat of our pants. We'd read online that they had a nice parade. So we thought we knew what a parade would be like. We thought there'd be lots of music and lots of Irish dancers and stuff like that. It was different. It was very much a nice small community parade. The sort of parade that would have happened in the small town where I grew up, which was nice. It was there was a real community spirit, and it wasn't about tourists. It was about
Okay.
the people that lived there. We joked that there were no kids left to watch the parade because nearly every kid in Killarney was in the parade. They were all marching with their sports teams and their dance groups, and they were also happy and excited to be in the St. Patrick's Day parade. It was really a lot of fun to watch.
Oh, I imagine. And when you go to a parade like that, it's almost impossible not to feel like you're a part of the community, even if it's just for that day.
Yeah, that's true. And they
And
have this really neat thing that they do in Killarney. I don't know if they do it anywhere else on St. Patrick's Day. The traffic lights, the green traffic
mhm.
lights, are shamrocks on St. Patrick's Day. They have
Oh,
some sort of plastic
how fun
insert
is
that they
that?
pop in on top of the green light. So instead of a circle, you have shamrocks all over town in the traffic lights.
I think all traffic lights should be like that. That sounds great.
They're much more interesting that way.
So then what did you do after the parade?
Um, we uh, we we spent some time just sort of relaxing in the afternoon because it was very crowded and quite a bit busy. We then decided we didn't want to get the car out again because it was just the streets were a mess. There was just streets were blocked off and there were just people everywhere. We decided to take a walk, and we went for a walk out to and I've forgotten the name of it. Just outside of find it
Muckross?
here. It's not Muckross,
Not
the old
Muckross.
castle.
Oh, Ross
Um,
Castle.
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, it sits
yeah, I've
right on
lost
the
the name of
lake.
it. Yeah. Yeah, it
Yep.
was already closed for the day by the time we got there. We were able to have a look around. It was very pretty, and it was a very nice walk. A long walk, but it was a nice walk.
So you went through the national park then, and if you were leaving from the kind of the city center of Killarney, it is quite a little walk there.
Yeah, it was a good walk. But we were able the day that we arrived in Killarney, the day before, we drove out to the national park and took a jaunty cart out to the Gap of Dunlow, which was
Oh, good. You
beautiful
did get to
too.
take a cart.
Eventually.
And that's a beautiful park. So now you took the jaunting cart ride out to Dunlow. So did it take you to, oh goodness, Lord Brendan's cottage? Did it go from the entry to the cottage and then back, or how far did that go?
We started at, is it Kate Carney's cottage?
Hmm.
That's where we started,
Yep.
and we just went straight out the road to the Gap of Dunlow and then turned around and came back. It was
Okay.
very end of the
Okay.
day. It was about 5 p.m. probably when we got there. So it was a drive straight out and back again. I would have loved to have had time to walk it because then I could have stopped and taken a lot of pictures because it was beautiful.
Right.
But it was sort of end of the day.
Excellent. And how many days were you in Killarney then? Was it just the one, or were you there for 2 days?
We spent 2 nights there. So by the time we
Okay.
arrived on the first day, it was late afternoon, and then it was St.
Okay.
Patrick's Day, and then we left the next morning.
Mhm. Goodness. And you went straight from there over to Cork.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah, we stopped. We went to Blarney first, and we headed straight to Blarney in the morning to see the castle. Excuse me, but my daughter was afraid to kiss it, kiss the Blarney Stone. She didn't like the whole idea of hanging out over the edge of the castle, so she said, "Nah, I'm not doing that." So we just saw the castle, and then we did a little shopping at Blarney Woolen Mills, and then we headed to Cove because we wanted her to see the museum at Cove because we'd visited there on our previous trip and knew that she's very interested in history and all of that. So we knew she'd be
Okay.
very interested to see the place where her ancestors had got on the ship and headed to Canada.
So now, do you have the records that say they did go out of Cove? Because wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think my husband does. He has my side of the family doesn't have as much research. We know we're from the Cork area, Cork and Wexford,
Okay.
but he's done a lot more research online. So he actually found the church where his great great grandparents got married, and so we were able to go and see the church on the outside where they were married. And then he found out that
Wow.
they left Ireland 4 years later to on the
Okay.
ship to Canada.
That's really incredible. I'm always so envious of people who can get that kind of information, because my Irish roots are so far back
Mm-hmm.
that we can get to a certain point and then we're just blocked.
Yeah.
So
Well, so far, well,
I'm always a bit envious of that.
his family left in 1847, so he was able to go
Oh
back
wow.
very
Okay.
far. Yeah. So they were married in 1843. They left Ireland in 1847, and his great great grandfather actually
Wow.
died on the ship on the way over. So
Oh.
his great great grandmother had a young son who was, I think, 2 or 3 years old. So you can imagine, in 1847, this young woman with a little boy landed in Quebec
Wow.
all by herself. And she remarried a few years later, but it was that little boy that survived the voyage is my husband's ancestor.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. That gave me chills.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say now? A lot of people think about visiting Cork and Cove, and what would you say for the brief time you were there? I know you went to the museum, but you had been there in the past. What would you say you should not miss in Cork and Cove, especially if you have an interest in history?
Um, Definitely I think it's called the Heritage Museum, the Cove Heritage Museum. It's a fascinating little exhibit museum that goes through a lot of the history about people leaving during the potato famines and all of that, leaving Ireland, and the ships to Canada and the U.S. And they also they touch on a lot of the shipping history in that area, and all that as well. We ran out of time and didn't get to see it, but there's a Titanic museum there as well, which my daughter would have loved to see, because she's a bit obsessed with the Titanic. We've done all of everything Titanic you can do on the east coast of Canada, but she really wanted to see that as well. And we just didn't have time for everything because we had to get to Dublin. But the town is beautiful as well. Like it's a lovely place to walk around. There's they can walk along the sea. It's a beautiful place. But I'd say definitely in Cove. I haven't spent much time in Cork, but in Cove, definitely that Heritage Museum is a big part of Ireland history and even North American history, to understand the story of so many people that had to leave Ireland and come to the US and to Canada and Australia, I guess, as well.
Excellent. And then, so you didn't spend the night in Cork. You just went straight back up to Dublin, correct?
Yeah, we were on our way to Dublin.
Now, where did you stay in Dublin when you were getting ready to leave?
I see your daughter in the background.
There is.
We stayed at the Fitzwilliam right by St. Stephen's Green, which is very central, great location to walk everywhere that you wanted to walk in Dublin.
And then, so you drove into Dublin that final day?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We went to the airport. We dropped our car at the airport. And then I got a cab into the city. We don't like driving in big cities.
I was actually curious, because the first time that I drove in Dublin was actually last year. And even after, a dozen years of driving in Ireland, I think my knuckles were white and my nerves were completely frazzled. So I was curious if you did drive into Dublin or not.
Yeah, no, there was no way we were going to try it, because it's hard enough being on the opposite side of the road where there's not much traffic and you don't have to think so much about turns and everything. But some of those little narrow country roads, oh my goodness. I find it hardest because my husband driving on the right side and I'm on the left, and I feel like I'm going to hit the walls on the side of the road all the time. I'm constantly going, ah! It drives me crazy, but it makes me nervous.
And then, so did you have 2 nights then in Dublin?
3 nights in Dublin.
Or just the one? 3 nights in Dublin.
3 nights in Dublin.
So following, you were there the day following St. Patrick's Day. So were you still finding a lot of leftover revelry in Dublin?
It wasn't dirty in any way at all. Like, there wasn't a mess on the street. There was still a lot of people there, and all the St. Patrick's decorations were still up, and there was a lot still happening, because the St. Patrick's Festival started on St. Patrick's Day and was going through all weekend So there were streets closed with little carnivals for the kids set up and music and all that sort of thing. And everything was still lit green, and there were green balloons everywhere outside the shops and everything to celebrate. So it was still very much St. Patrick's Day in Dublin. They were
Okay.
still celebrating, but the parade and the partying were over and done with.
Now, did you feel like the St. Patrick's Day spirit or the extra crowds that were obviously there for St. Patrick's Day, do you feel like that may have changed the Dublin experience you might have had you gone at a different time?
I don't think so, because it didn't seem crowded to me.
Okay.
There were a lot of people in the Grafton Street area shopping, but there, nothing was particularly busy. We mostly just spent a lot of time walking around the city. We went to see the Book of Kells.
Mhm.
We didn't really have to wait to get in. We just sort of bought our tickets and went in. There wasn't long lineups or anything. Um, we also went to the Leprechaun Museum, which I'd never seen before, and we had to buy tickets and come back a little bit later. But it wasn't like, nothing was particularly busy. I think it seemed to me that the crowds are really concentrated on March 17th, and particularly in the Temple
Okay.
Bar area. And then like the rest of the weekend, I don't know if a lot of those people have left already, or if they just sort of disperse and they're not really all in the same place. But I expected it to feel more busy and crowded than it did, because there'd been a lot of people
Okay.
there for the parade. But I didn't feel at all that it's not like New York at New Year's or anything like that, because we've done that too. And it wasn't like
Oh
that. I was
goodness.
expecting it to be busy, like not that bad, but I was expecting it to be more of that kind of busy, and it wasn't. So it was nice. It was a nice surprise. There were a lot of
Oh,
people, but
that's
it
good
was.
to know because right, right. Because I haven't been to Ireland for St. Patrick's Day because we are always so busy here at home.
Mhm.
Um, and but you always see the big crowds in Dublin, and you just kind of wonder if they're all just there and then they leave, or if they stick around for a little while. So it's good to know that it wasn't too terribly crowded for you. Now,
Mhm.
I want to go back to your planning. Um, you said that you really had to work to put this all together to make it all work. When you were planning for your hotels, especially, did you run into a lot of booking issues? Did you find that things that you wanted, places you wanted to stay at, were relatively easy to book at that time of the year, or did you have to go, switching days around to what you would have preferred to do?
It wasn't too bad. The only issue I really had was with finding a date for Dromoland Castle, because we were sort of, because of the St. Patrick's Day issue and realizing that we needed to be in Killarney for St. Patrick's Day. We had a hard time trying to figure out how it was going to work, that we could stay in a castle and get to Killarney for St. Patrick's. So that was the only issue, because there wasn't, I think the
Mhm.
15th, when we stayed at Dromoland, that was the only day within sort of 4 or 5 days that they had any availability. So we were sort of stuck that was the one we could only spend that night there, and then we had to move
Okay.
on, because it didn't work either way, on either side of it. So
Okay.
that was the only real issue. Now I planned a, a probably I probably booked 2 to 3 months ahead of time. I'd have to check my
Hmm.
dates to see, but I'm not a last minute, like, now let's try and find a hotel kind of person. I like to have it. I figure out where I want to stay, and then that's, once I've decided that's where I want to stay, that's where I want to stay. And I don't want
Okay.
to have to change my plans. So I always plan a bit ahead, so that the hotels will still have availability. I was a little worried ahead of time that St. Patrick's Day was going to be an issue, but um, it really wasn't. I think maybe the castle was maybe full for St. Patrick's Day weekend, and that's why I think it was a Wednesday night was the only night that we were able to get
Hmm.
there. But other than that, there didn't seem to be any issues with availability in March, mid March.
That's good to hear. Now, you said, obviously your trip was relatively quick. If you had to do it again and you weren't kind of encumbered by um, visiting to, Killarney on a certain day, or having to stay at a castle on a certain day, how would you have changed your trip itinerary?
Ideally, I would have liked at least 10 nights and probably better 2 weeks. If I'd had 2 weeks, I would have done a bigger circle of Ireland so that Emma could have seen more. As we spent time on our trip, my husband and I, in the area around Ashford Castle, and I loved it. But there wasn't time to get up there with only 8 nights, and I would have spent more days in each location so that we could have explored around more. But sometimes you just got to work within the time that you have. And I think because of that, you sort of have to realize that you're not going to see everything you want to see and just make some priorities and try your best to fit those in, and realize that you're just going to have to go back to Ireland again some other time to see the places that you want to see.
Now, were there any places that you visited that you thought, okay, this maybe I would have rather done this other thing? Maybe instead of visiting the cliffs, I would have rather done a hawk walk with the falconry. Were there any things that you just kind of thought, okay, it was nice, but maybe shouldn't have been quite so important to me?
I don't think so. Honestly, I've been in Ireland twice, and I've never had an experience that I didn't enjoy. It's a country that I just really, really love, and I've honestly, it's probably one of the few places where I've never said, didn't really love that. Every single thing that I've ever done in Ireland was enjoyable, and I was glad that I'd done it. And we were able this time to do some things that I'd never done before, that my husband had never done before, as well as we repeated some things that we'd done before, but we really wanted Emma to see. And even seeing it the second time is still really cool. So it's sort of one of those destinations where, sorry.
No, you're good. It is one of those destinations where you can do something and then return and do it again. And it's new the second time as well, because there's been a subtle change, or, especially traveling with kids, they'll notice things that you never do. And that brings a whole new experience to it. So what would you say if you had to pick 2 or 3 things that were just, blow you out of the water? This was just so incredible of an experience. On your trip, what 3 things would you say that maybe were your top experiences?
I think the St. Patrick's Day parade, because that had been on my bucket list as well. It's just something that I really wanted to experience, St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. And I'm glad that we chose to do it in a smaller community, because we got to see sort of the real Ireland celebrating their holiday as opposed to the party in Dublin. I think the cliffs of Moher was spectacular, and that was the first time for all of us, and it's just it's just incredible natural beauty, like just amazing. I think my third thing, I'd say seeing the couple of small towns that we saw in Wicklow, Wexford. If you have Irish heritage, being able to find some place that you can connect to your roots, even if it's not some amazing place. Like, this is a tiny little town, a tiny little village, really. This tiny little church, that's centuries old, and there's nothing else around it. But being able to stand outside the church doors and know that that's where your family was, 150 years ago, that's something really cool. And you can't explain how amazing it is to make that connection. And I think that was to be able to give that to our daughter, that she could stand there and say, this is where I come from. Like that. That's right. One of the amazing things about traveling someplace where your ancestors came from.
Yeah, that tangible heritage just had to be an incredible feeling to think, my ancestor could have stood here. And yeah, I think that's the dream of a lot of a lot of people of Irish heritage,
Mm-hmm.
and that you got to experience that is just incredible.
Yeah.
Now, traveling in Ireland has a few quirky little things about it. So what did you find that maybe you weren't expecting that came with your travels? Was there anything that surprised you, be it hotels, renting a car? I mean, anything that just you weren't really expecting?
Um, I'm trying to think. I always tell this story. This is from our first trip to Ireland, and I still smile every time I think of it. But when my husband and I were in Ireland 20 years ago, and getting used to all the roundabouts and being on the wrong side of the road, we were driving through Shannon towards Killarney, and we got in a big roundabout. I think it was in Shannon, and we're in this big roundabout, with lots of exits, and we'd already circled a couple of times because we were confused and we couldn't figure out where to get off. And of course, he's driving, he's sitting on the right, and I'm on the left, and we're circling again, and this great big delivery truck comes alongside us, and the man's motioning to me to roll down the window. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what did we do? He's going to yell at me or something, right? So I roll down my window, and he says, "Where are you trying to go?" And I was like, "We're trying to get to Killarney." So he's driving along beside us going, "Okay, you want to get the next exit." And he proceeded to give us directions how to get off the road to get to Killarney as we were circling the roundabout. And I always tell people this story and say that would not happen anywhere but in Ireland. The people are just so friendly and helpful, particularly when you're out of the city. They just will go out of their way to make sure that you're having a good time and that you're not having any difficulty. It's such a friendly place to visit. The other thing that I think people need to be aware of is that it is difficult to drive on the wrong side of the road in some of these little tiny towns and little narrow roads. And the technology has changed since we were there 20 years ago. We had a GPS this time. Don't trust the GPS. We felt like
right.
some sort of weird sense of humor. She would start taking us down these little tiny lanes that we thought we're going to get stuck. And then she started saying, "Make a U-turn." And we're thinking, how? There's like no space on the road. And it actually got kind of funny because we thought, oh, you've got to sort of know where you're going and look at a paper map, because the GPS might be taking you through some field that is the shortest distance to where you're trying to go, but you don't really want to be driving on that road.
Well, and your GPS is only as good as its last update.
Exactly.
And sometimes they're just not connecting. I know that last year, my GPS, I wanted to go to Doolin, which I had been to half a dozen times. And my GPS wanted to take me to the Doolin record shop in Killarney. And so I'm looking at the map and I'm like, okay, I have to go east and then I need to go north. And if I hit this, I've gone too far.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the easiest way to navigate almost in Ireland, is to say, okay, I need to follow this to this point and then look again and decide which way to go from there, because you really can't get lost very, very easily, which is kind of funny to say.
No, you can always find your way back on track, even if you're almost in the farmer's field.
And you never know what you'll find in that field.
Exactly.
Because one of the beautiful things about Ireland is that there are, I believe they say, you can barely turn a corner without finding a ruin. And a lot of the main ruins in Ireland are situated on private land, but are under the care of the Office of Public Works. So even if you get lost in a farmer's field, you might just come across a castle or a round tower or an old priory. So
yeah, there's always something you
could always be. Exactly. So what would you say would be, if you were just to give one tip to families who are maybe thinking about an Ireland vacation or aren't really sure if Ireland would be a good place to take their family, what one piece of advice would you have?
Do it. I think it's hard to find a place that's more family friendly than Ireland, so definitely don't hesitate. Have a good idea what your priorities are, what you most want to see, but don't try to do it all. It's a small country, but there's far too much to see and do that you can't do it any reasonable length vacation. So decide what your priorities are, and just give up the idea that you're gonna see it all or you're gonna run yourself ragged. Enjoy yourself, enjoy the experience of being in Ireland, and just soak it all up, because you're gonna want to go back again.
Again and again and again. Well, Lisa, I want to thank you so much for popping in and having this short chat with me. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to see. I know you've had a couple of short articles on Gone with the Family about your Ireland trip. I would assume there are going to be more
Yes, there's many
coming up.
coming.
I understand. I understand. It takes time to get all those up and to process the memories, because when you come home from Ireland, and I don't know if it was this way with you, but every time I come home, it's a bit of re-entry to come home from there and to not feel like it was almost a dream. And so processing, not only your memories, but then also all the pictures
Yeah.
is a little time consuming.
Yeah, that's true.
So
well, thank you so much for having
definitely.
me. It was wonderful chatting with you about Ireland.
Thank you. And I so enjoyed hearing about your trip. And for anybody who wants to follow up, Lisa's site is called Gone with the Family. It's gonewiththefamily.com. And she'll be sharing their Ireland adventures, as well as all the other places that she and her family travel to, which has been quite considerable. So there's plenty to read there. So I do obviously invite you to go over and say hi to Lisa. Tell her you saw her here on the webcast or heard her on the podcast. And she will be more than happy to answer any questions about travel in any of the places she's been. So again, Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Jody.
All right. And for everyone else, thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to talk to you again. The next blab is scheduled for April. No, gosh, we're almost at the end of April. It'll be May 1st, May Day, May 1st at 2 p.m. I am still working on getting a guest, but I have a few in mind, so it will be a great chat. And I hope you'll come back then, May 1st, 2 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. in Ireland, and we'll talk again then. Thanks so much. All right, and stopping